Hi, welcome to NDE TV. I'm Peggy Robinson. Today's guest is Steve Swygert, and he is going to tell us about his near-death experience. Hi, Steve.
Hi, Peggy. How are you today?
I'm good. You having a happy Easter?
Great. Absolutely. Happy Easter to you too.
Good. Well, I'm just going to let you jump in and just pretend this is your show and just take over and tell us your story.
Okay. Well, it was 2018 and it was August 12th. And I don't really remember the immediate happening preceding calling 911, but I knew very quickly I was in bad shape. That was on a Sunday morning. I'll say it on a Friday morning. I was at a theater, a local theater where I serve on the board of directors, and had attended an event there and had not felt well and had a headache the whole time and stayed in the office a good majority of the time there while the event was taking place. And I ended up walking home that night, which is only a couple of miles away. And I don't really know what happened Saturday other than that I hadn't been feeling well and I was resting. And then it was Sunday morning, I'll say between 2 and 3 a.m. roughly. I don't remember the exact time. I knew I was in imminent danger and I was able to call 911 somehow. But when I was looking at my phone, it looked like 5 or 6 screens of the phone. But I noticed my finger when I would take my index finger to try to dial. I noticed that, all 5 or 6 images I saw kind of kaleidoscoping together. My finger would go to the proper number on all those pictures. So long story short, I was able to call 911 and was waiting for the paramedics to get here. And the last thing, well, I was at the top of the steps and I was going to go downstairs and unlock the door so that they could get in. And I had told them to please bring a defibrillator. I'd had heart problems for a while, but I could tell the way this felt that I was definitely having a heart attack. It had all the telltale signs. And long story short, I'm at the top of the steps. I fell down the steps. So I had a heart attack and ischemic stroke and fell down the steps and broke my neck. Somehow I found myself crumpled at the bottom of the steps, and my steps go down about 11 steps. Then they make a right angle turn. And when I first came to, I was at the bottom of the steps in the corner where that right angle is. And my house is a double brick construction with plaster walls. And I had put my neck right in there. And I don't know if you can see that line about here. That was from my neck being back. So when I woke up, had my neck over like that. And I was shocked I was even coming to it all. And I took my right arm and lifted my left arm over because I couldn't move my left arm without the assistance of my right arm. And I reached back to see if any bone was protruding and to see if there was any bleeding. And I felt for sure that I must have a compound fracture, like the bone was protruding in my neck. And fortunately, there was no blood. But I sat down on the floor of the room that's immediately at the bottom of those steps, and was sitting with my behind down on the hardwood floor. And so my back, this is my legs, my back was like this with my head up at the top, and I slammed my neck into the floor 3 different times. Worst pain I've ever felt in my life. And then that's the last thing I remember. And I went to a place of just blackness. And all I could think about then was, how do I get back to the woman that I was in love with at that time in my life? Long story short there, we spent some wonderful time together after all of this happened. And but we're not together now. But I just immediately thought in that place of blackness, how do I get back to her and my dogs, of all things? And after that, I remember waking to CPR, and I totally believe I was on the floor, the same floor that I just mentioned in my house. And I remember I aspirated. So aspirations, when you get, for those that don't know, aspirations when you get air trapped in the abdominal cavity. And so you kind of spew out liquid and the air and everything. And it felt like from my belly button straight up to my mouth, I could feel them rip a tube out. And that's the breathing tube that they had in me. And then I was very, very combative, but very quickly also knew, oh, these are the people here to help me. And then I remembered, what was taking place. So I kind of remember, I thought they took me out on a like a ambulance medical bed that it really seemed to me like I remember being on one of the electric type of ones that you can raise and lower. Could be completely wrong there, but my house is in the mountains in Cumberland, Maryland, and I remember when we were just outside my house, there's a very narrow bunch of stairs that go downward to the street, first to the sidewalk, then there's more stairs that go down to the street. And I really thought like maybe we fell over or one of the guys almost fell over outside. And at that point, I felt like I was out of my body again. So I'm positive I died again. CPR brought me back, and then I was combative, and then it seemed like it happened all over again. The ambulance is probably the hospital, my apologies, is about 2.5 miles away. And I remember flying over the ambulance on the way to the hospital and knowing that my body was inside, and that I knew clearly I was outside of my body, and that I was dead. And it's kind of strange. I had an awareness that I knew I was coming back, and I wanted to go as deep as I could into the experience. And I had read about near-death experience as a child, then off and on through the years. I didn't seek it out much as far as material to read. And indeed, there wasn't as much available as there is today also. And anyhow, then later at the hospital's a whole different experience. And I don't really remember anything after flying over the ambulance of the hospital. So my belief is that I then was at the hospital. It seems very clear to me that I remember being defibrillated 3 times. And that, like, when I was shocked, it felt like my whole body just tensed up and my arms stuck out straight, and I felt like, stop it, But I was also out of my body and elsewhere. So those are not super indelible memories. They're rather subtle in comparison to some of the other parts. And long story short, a medical team had worked on me to revive me. And there came a point where they stopped their efforts, and most of the medical team left the room. I was laying supine, so of course that's face up to the ceiling and flat on the medical bed where I was receiving treatment. Had all kinds of tubes in me and the electrical devices on my chest and whatnot to monitor me while they were working on trying to revive me. And there was a nurse at the end of the bed on the left side near my feet, and she had her back to me, and I think she was just cleaning up from the they're working on a lot of things. They're opening up new packages, they're giving you this and that, and I think they were just cleaning up. And then there was a doctor kind of behind me and up at the right side of my head. And so I had already been off in heaven. And I was there, returned to my body, but not in my body yet. And I was thinking to myself, well, how do I get back in my body? And this thought just came to me immediately that, well, I've always been really good at talking. I'll just talk. So I said, and I said it kind of quietly because I didn't want to scare the nurse or the doctor. and they were waiting and they're cleaning up. They were waiting for a doctor to call my death. I very clearly remember the medical team saying there was a big feeling of, well, they were upset that they couldn't save me, and they knew that I fought hard, and you could feel like their energy leave the room because their attempts weren't successful. And they had to wait for a neutral and unbiased doctor to call my death. So those two people were left of many people that were in the room assisting, trying to resuscitate me. So I'm back at that place where I'm, knowing I'm going to get back into my body, knowing that I'm going to survive, but seeing myself there dead, thinking my body, wow, look at that. I have a lot of fight left in me. Like, I wanted to come back the whole time. I wanted to come back, which is kind of different than I hear from most people's
Right.
near-death experiences. And but I love life, and I've always loved life, and I've always held the value of life, be it my own or others, at the highest. It's the most precious gift for sure. And so I just said, well, I had the thought that I'll just speak. And so I very quietly said, so I guess I died. And the nurse turned around and gasped, and her eyes were so big. And of course, oh my God, what do
So
we
I
do?
guess I died.
Yeah, I didn't know what else to say, and she was just, oh my God, and couldn't believe it. Her eyes were so big, and she's like, doctor, oh my God, what do we do? What do we do? And he was relatively calm compared to her, but still just totally astonished. And he said, well, I guess we have a patient again. And so at that point, I stayed back in my body from there moving forward. But I experienced a lot while I was outside of my body too. And it's hard to put a lot of that into words because, of course, most of it's like nothing we know in this daily existence, this physical existence that we share. And it's quite astonishing. There's a trauma aspect of it, but then there's this very beautiful, spiritual, if you will, aspect of it that is, boy, just really one of the best experiences in my life from that aspect. The dying process, the physical dying process for me was extremely traumatic and extremely painful. The treatment was painful. I had been given CPR. Amazingly, I came home in 5 days. 3 days after they gave me an implant. I have a pacemaker defibrillator unit that's right there. 3 days after the event, they implanted that. 2 more days later, I went home. I had a nurse take care of me for 2 days, and she said, well, you don't even need any help. You're doing fantastic. And, a lot of the professionals were just astonished at that also.
Isn't
I
that the
had
way
a
it
neck.
always is? If you've had an NDE, it's like you got miracle healing.
Absolutely. And I was still in tremendous pain. I still have two or three sublated, which is dislocated cervical vertebrae in my neck. So they're in pain daily, but they wanted to fuse my neck about 15 years ago. And I never went through that process. So April 1st, just now, April 1st, I was in a very bad car accident also. I don't know how this body can take what it can. I know I came from a very tough father who was a West Point graduate and a retired colonel and an airborne ranger and a Korean War and Vietnam War vet, God rest his soul. And, so who knows, genetics.
Well, like you said, you're
Or
a fighter.
or
I
or
was
both.
too.
And yes,
In my second NDE,
and
I was a
and
fighter.
and I think that's, you got to want to live. First of all, I'm not saying everybody that has an NDE wants to live. Most want to stay in the exalted realm that we came back from. And that's totally understandable. I've been in a lot of pain throughout my life. be it being molested when I was young, or having witnessed an airplane crash for my first or second memory. My father was in Vietnam and got shot in the head. It didn't kill him, but my first memories are really dramatic and traumatic things. Dramatic D and traumatic with a T. And I was next to the Pentagon on 9/11. So I've just had some real, and if you're a survivor, you just have these kind of things happen in life. That's part of surviving. And I try to just move past them quickly. But first, in the out of the body experiences, I was first in the place of blackness. And you can't help but wonder, wow, where am I? You're outside of your body immediately. It's as innate a feeling as you're in your body when you're here. And then I'm being brought back with CPR here at my house, and then I'm flying over the ambulance. So I know I died again. That they lost me, quote unquote, again.
Were you in blackness then, or was it just the day that you saw?
Well, it was not nighttime. It was morning time, but it felt like that. It just felt like that part of it was normal, except I'm flying above the ambulance, So again, it was clear to me that I'm out of my body again. And I know that they're working on me in the ambulance, but I was removed from myself at that point, and I'd already resigned myself to this is part of my journey and part of the process. But I did feel like I know they're going to bring me back, which is an odd feeling also. And having read some of the things, I remember like 5th or 6th grade in my elementary school, we had a relatively small library, but we had poltergeist books. We had near-death experience books. And I can't remember any of those stories vividly, but the resonating themes that ring through in most stories were certainly presented in those books. And you just like, oh, I that's why I knew what was happening. I didn't feel like, even though it was foreign to me, I didn't feel like it was foreign to me. I had some kind of awareness. And then throughout the years, I'm 54 now. Throughout the years, you just can't help, especially with the internet, that you come across this and that and you read them. And so you're like, oh, I remember, the tunnel. I went through the tunnel. But first I was in the place of blackness. Then I was over the ambulance, and that seemed pretty normal. And then it just seemed like, well, I told my sister, my eldest sister, after everything, after I came home from the hospital and everything, I told her, I said, well, you're going to think this sounds crazy, but I was with them. And she said, who's them? And I said, the great council in the sky. And I didn't see faces while I was there in that particular instance. But I knew I was in the presence of many souls or many beings of light. And that's indeed who they were. There's just knowingness about certain aspects of it. There was a part where I, first on the journey there, was definitely like going through a wormhole throat. I read a lot about physics, and we see imaging to the best of our ability that we can image what it might look like to go through a wormhole throat, although of course we have no real idea. But I definitely felt like I went through one. It was almost like a kaleidoscope of light and different colors swirling. And when I first entered it, it seemed kind of slow, and then it just felt faster and faster through that place into that next realm. And it's like you're going the speed of light. And I felt like I flew over the pyramids while they were being constructed. It seemed like I went over a timeline of mankind, and I saw, not to say the pyramids were the beginning, but it's like I saw the beginning and all the way through to the end of what was mankind. But like a massive download that happened so quick you can't even recall it all, but that all the answers.
As you're going through the tunnel?
I didn't have a life review. Sorry?
as you're going through the tunnel? Is that when you saw it?
Yes. Yes. Starting out slow and then just, faster and faster and faster. And it's like I saw just all of everything that's ever happened to mankind. But the only thing I can recall clearly is like a couple of seconds of seeing lots of people building the pyramids and working together towards a common goal. And the rest of it's just like, oh wow, I'm watching everything that's ever happened and more, and then I just knew I was in the presence. I remember hearing music, but it wasn't earthly music whatsoever. Just all I can say is it was celestial or heavenly music. I can't tell you. There is just nothing to compare it to, but it was like every soul that was present, every soul that remained to stay instead of turn back and either return to their own body or start another journey. It was like each one of those presences made a celestial tone, and then together there was this most beautiful heavenly music. And I love music, and I write music and enjoy music. I've been in an orchestra, sang in a band, rock and roll, and recorded some of my own music. And so it's, this was just a completely different kind of experience than
It makes me feel like, are we all just a computer chip in one great big computer?
I sure understand that. And, there's a lot of great physics writing about, are we in a hologram? Are we a projection, and things of that nature? And, the interesting thing about mathematics and physics is that if you're truly open-minded, you have to at least not discount those things you can't disprove. And so I'm very open-minded to those things. And physics only further opens the door to that being a possibility. But of course, we don't have those answers. And
Right.
part of our journey here, the curiosity side of it is seeking those answers. But, and so therefore, I don't know those answers, of course, but I do feel like we're here on a journey to evolve our souls. And as terrible as some of the events we might experience through life indeed absolutely are, I had to testify against a friend of mine who murdered his dad. I've been through some horrific stuff, and it's like those experiences are still learning experiences. They're things that make life sweeter and show us how valuable life is, and faith and love. And I think, faith and love are always, it for me personally, it always comes down to the most resounding message that faith and love are what resonate clearer and truer than anything else I've ever known. And they also don't leave you when everybody and everything else will. And for me personally, and I can only speak for me personally, I never try to push my views on others. I just hope people remain open-minded. Prayer has been essential to me in my life because, again, it's a tool or a coping mechanism, if you will, that's always there for us. And, it's difficult to go through the kind of trauma I experienced on August 12th of 2018, but I took scuba diving classes when I was 15 years old and got certified through PADI, the Professional Association of Diving Instructors, and NAUI, the National Association of Underwater Instructors. And one thing that was emphasized over and over and over through the scuba diving lessons was to, no matter under what conditions you're suffering, don't panic. And of course, that's almost impossible. But
Right.
here in the mind's eye, we have to find that place when we're having
Yeah,
trauma.
our adrenaline's supposed to rescue us.
Absolutely, and it indeed does.
But
It
not in
gives
drowning.
it gives us extra energy. It can give us extra focus and everything. But some of us panic more than others, and of course, it depends on our neural wiring. It depends on our past life experience, what our coping mechanisms are, and so many other factors. But if we can remember to not panic and then pray. And prayer can just be as much as just focusing on what's at hand right now. And please give me the best ability to get through this as best that I can. And knowing that it's to something that's more powerful than ourselves, that's not us, not human, and is indeed the creator. Call it what you will. I don't care for the semantics and the division of denominations and things of that nature. We all have the voice of intuition within us, and well, I hope we all have it.
It's all about that
And
relationship, isn't it? With the
absolutely,
divine.
absolutely, and we should focus there and learn to trust our intuition, uh, and develop a relationship with that, and realize that it's more than just our conscience within. It is the connection that's resonating as clear as a bell or as loud as a trumpet through most of us. And I think, at least in my short 54 years, I think I'm watching humanity become more and more detached from those things. And there's so many different factors that certainly seem to be making that a fact. And there's plenty of scientific evidence to back those things up too. But I also see a time where it seems that humanity on a whole level is, I think, returning to those things. But it takes these great traumas. And then it takes, part of faith in ourselves. If we don't, we might not have it to something outside of us yet, per se, for each of us. But it takes time to build that faith within ourselves to trust our own intuition. Like, golly, I should have listened to that voice. Boy, I knew I had that feeling. I had that gut feeling, and it was right. And you go through that a couple of decades, and your intuition will prove itself to you if you listen to it. And I think faith, prayer, it's the same thing. We know what to pray for. We know who we're talking to. We might argue about what you call it, what I call it, what somebody else calls it, but a principled creator is what we're talking about. And it's a shame we argue because we don't know. It's just something that's principled, and it's just something that's the creator. And it's
I like
something
that you put that
that
word principled in there, because to me, it's like, we know the creator has principles that we are supposed to live up to, just like
exactly.
even though our spouse isn't around, we know how to conduct ourselves. As a child, they know how to conduct themselves, even though their parents aren't watching or the teacher isn't watching. It's that knowing that they have principles and we are to adhere to them even when they're not
Absolutely.
looking. And,
And
and we know
intuition
God is always looking.
exactly. And intuition always tells us right from wrong if we ourselves question it. And, intuition never, oh, I don't know, let me get back to you later. We know instantly. When we're children, we know right from wrong. We all know it before we're even taught it. It's an amazing innate ability. And there's a lot more innate ability within that we have certainly become seemingly more and more detached from. But I don't want to focus there.
Yeah, you're fine. You're fine. I get it.
The parts of the experience that were fascinating, traveling through the wormhole through it and hearing music. There was at one point where I was at the edge of a meadow, and it's like I walked through the meadow, and I don't remember that part, but I remember being at the edge of the meadow, and and this is interesting. I was there in the meadow with the one that I was in love with at the time, and she was not dead. So there was somebody in my experience that was, here on Earth, sharing the physical experience we call life. And I remember looking across the meadow, and the meadow was like coming out of the woods, and then there's a beautiful field with flowers, and we're looking across it like we're looking towards the future, and I can just say it was beautiful. And it was not worldly as we know it here. It was completely otherworldly. We were light bodies, which was interesting. The rest of the experience was like you know, when we were light body form, it was like we were our bodies, but our bodies were composed of light. And that's the only time I felt like that. The rest of the experience, which was in that realm, was more like I was. A lot of people say they had a view that was 360 degrees around. I had a spherical view. So if you imagined yourself a microscopic sphere, and you could see in every single direction, which is more than 360 degrees. That would be linear in a two-dimensional. In a three-dimensional way, we're seeing spherically around ourselves. And I certainly had that ability there. And there came a knowingness of like, there's no talking. If there's other beings present, you know what one another's thinking. And it's never negative stuff. There was a part there where everything there was beautiful, and everything that there was 100% agreement on would materialize, just as you know, anything in our life around us. But if there was just one voice of dissension, we'll call it, it would all disappear. Everything would disappear. And it was more like, not that there's lots of dissension there, because there wasn't, but it was more like a valuable lesson right off the bat. Like, basically, we don't dissent here. You know, we appreciate and we share. And there's, you know, I just knew there was no greed. I knew there was nothing but love. There was that love we all, others talk about, that's just an all-encompassing love. And it's not the love that we know here. We only get glimpses of it. And I don't even think the glimpses of the love we know here do the love there justice. That again is a knowingness. I remember hearing the music, and that was like each person, or each, I don't want to say person, but each soul present had their own tone that they contributed to these beautiful melodies, melodies and harmonies, all, you know, all blended together. Music's not just a melody. It's got a melody, it's got a harmony, et cetera, et cetera. And all those integral parts were present, but beautiful in a way I can't even describe. Music, and I absolutely adore music. So when I was in the point of perspective where I could see spherically around myself, I just felt like I was a part of energy itself, and that I took up no three-dimensional volume. I was only a point of perspective without mass, is what it felt like. You could, or I could be anywhere instantaneously with just the thought of wanting to be, if it was to be before the pyramids, if I wanted to return back there, if it was to be in the meadow or what, boom, you'd be there. And the traveling there was like going through that wormhole throat again, but like instantaneously. But I mean, it was like you were going faster than the speed of light or something. And you could just see, like, you'd start off kind of slow, and then it was just colors and twisting. But definitely, like, I knew I was going through a wormhole throat. I mean, it sounds silly, but it just like, oh, I know what this is right away. And I just kept thinking I wanted to go further and further into the experience. If I had any aspect about it that's disappointing, I wish I could recall more of it, because I definitely went deep into this, and I don't know exactly how long in this physical realm I was laying there waiting for the doctor to come call my death, but I definitely feel like it was a half an hour or more. It was a little while.
Did you go in the future?
And I think that I probably did, but nothing that I can recall. I mean, I really felt like I saw humanity from the very beginning to its end. And again, that's kind of a distinct knowingness, but I don't have any indelible recollection of it. And I, you know, maybe I don't need to, or maybe I don't want to. It's kind of hard to say there. It's amazing we can recall anything through these experiences, first of all, but it's also very evident to me that what I can recall seems like a little minute percentage of the overall experience, which is a little disappointing, you know. But I think a lot of that's associated with the trauma of it. I definitely had PTSD after this. I had it before this from other experiences, but it just kind of magnifies those things again. And time and being around the right network of friends and support lets all that settle. I feel like a tuning fork that was struck really hard and just vibrating out of tune. And it seems like with the passage of time, you start ringing or resonating properly again, how we're supposed to. And so I'm starting to feel that calmer inner self again, like I know I'm supposed to feel, like I know we're all supposed to feel. And it's been tough. The trauma aspects of it are tough. And then talking about this kind of stuff, it's not for everybody, of course. Some people will just give you the roll their eyes look and stuff like that, and but then there's others that are very eager to hear about this experience. And I've always had very strong faith, but I've always had a little bit of doubt.
I wish the ones that doubted, didn't believe, would ask more questions before they made up their mind and rolled their eyes and walked away. I wish they would ask more questions, because if they think we're lying, ask questions, find out, keep digging, and then make up your mind.
They'll have that opportunity. I feel like they'll have their opportunity, but I definitely agree with you. It's interesting, but I think we've all been the skeptic in one way, shape, or form. And again, being open-minded is really just about, if I can't disprove something personally, then I should at least think that it's possible. And if my experience of 54 years has taught me anything, is that there's certainly plenty of things that have come to fruition that were deemed or thought impossible. And some of the greatest minds of past history were persecuted for their thoughts. I don't want to say names because history isn't my forte. I might say Copernicus or Galileo. I don't want to say the wrong names, but there's certainly been men that have stepped forward and hey, this is what it looks like is actually happening, and then the church would go after them, for example, or something that it goes against doctrine. That's against God. But then later it's proven that it's actually.
I understand people need common sense. You don't want to be gullible. You don't want to believe every stupid thing that comes out of everybody's mouth, Then you just hate to dismiss everybody too. So it's a fine line.
Exactly. And the amazing thing today, we have you, for example, doing these wonderful videos of people sharing, and we have others that are making videos similar. We have more science, a growing body of evidence of science and documentation about these experiences. And, it's just getting to the point where I think a lot of people can't deny it anymore. And I'm talking about those that haven't experienced this phenomena, but it's very real. There's no question about it. I felt like with the life review, I felt like I knew I was coming back. I felt like I've had strong faith. None of us are perfect, for crying out loud, but I've never done anything so heinous. I've always valued life, and I've been there to stand up for life as I feel like I should. I'm only trying to honor the parents that brought me into this world. I was very fortunate to have absolutely wonderful, supportive, and loving parents. I'm living in a place now, and this is my 20th year here, where, in my youthful naivete, I thought everybody had parents like I did. And that is so far from the truth. It's been tough to watch the struggle here where I reside, that's very real. And to watch these kids grow up playing their little game called Jailbreak, and then watching them go to high school and then go to jail. There's terrible things ingrained in our communities here. There's terrible political games going on. There's terrible divisiveness taking place right now that is really ripping together the bond, ripping apart the bonds of humanity right now that are so frustrating. And
I'm seeing it in
I
near-death
am
experiences too. They've become divided. They are now, you
yes,
either have Christian near-death experience
absolutely.
podcasts or you have the New Age. And I've noticed that the New Age NDEers are now publicly stating, I am not Christian, where before it seemed like people assumed they were Christian because they were in heaven, they had this experience, and we assume. And it's not the case. And I thought, why is this hidden? And so I feel like they're coming out now and stating, I am not Christian. And, I know Peter Pandora, seen one the other day is called Not Church. And he goes in, and I assumed for a long time, I've known the last few years, but before that, I assumed, he's a minister, he's Christian, right? No. And then other ones are putting on their wall, I am not Christian. And they're near-death experiencers. And, a lot of people are being shocked. And I'm like, well, I've been kind of knowing this for a while now, but I was shocked a few years ago. And now we have just Christian podcasts for NDEs. They don't want anybody on there that's not Christian. And they will decide just how Christian you are. Maybe you're not Christian enough to be on their podcast. And they're telling people not to be on my podcast because they say I make Christians look bad by being on a podcast that I welcome everybody. I'm not going to say you can't be on here because you're atheist. I'm not going to say you can't be on here because whatever, because I just want to know your experience. I want to know what you saw and what you heard and what you feel about it. But yeah, that division is a real thing right now.
And God is all accommodating as you are. And people need to remember that. In denominations, my dad was also a mathematician and a civil engineer, but denominations have one specific purpose, and that is to divide. That is their function. And we can look at examples of the church, for example, that start out with the same agreement and then all of a sudden become splintered and splintered and splintered again and again and again, which is ripping the fabric of humanity apart. It's a shame people will focus on the details of denomination because we all know the cliche about what's in the details. And we don't have, life is so, for crying out loud, it's so short. I just lost my father at 89 years old in 2020 in May. 89 years old is a wonderful life, and he lived an absolutely wonderful life. But I'm 54. 89 is not that far away. We certainly don't have time to spread hate and argue about these things, but we have the choice and the free will to do so. But denominations divide, and they're going to continue to divide. And
I feel like the wider the divide gets, the bigger the gap, that leads to war.
Absolutely.
I seriously worry that we're going to have a Christians versus non-Christian war because they're hating church, they're hating Christians, and it's just growing and growing. And the Christians are responding by, we've got to arm ourselves and we got to get together and block out anything that's not Christian. And it's just like this big C in the middle. That's just, and I feel like the more divide, there's going to be war.
It's like a family. It's like if you had 2 brothers and 2 sisters, 4 children, and they were fighting over their parents. It's no different. We all have the same maker. Call him or her, it, what you will. And it's a principled creator. And again, if we're going to waste time arguing over this, Judaism and Islam and Christianity, they share the same creator.
Yeah. And I don't mind having people come on that think completely different than I do. But when you come on, just don't try to get me to agree with you. And I won't try to get you to agree with me. Let's just tell your story. So, but someone like you, we are on the same wavelength with things. And so we can discuss this, but other people, I'll completely keep the conversation off the table because it's not going to work well. And you can kind of tell, right?
It's important. Exactly. And it's important to know who you can articulate yourself to and then when to be quiet, because I don't like to engage in heated, angry type of conversation.
It
Arguing to
doesn't feel
me
good in here.
is a healthy thing.
Mm-mm.
Right. And arguing can be a healthy thing if we treat each other with respect and it's mutual. But when we start raising voices and pointing fingers and saying nasty stuff, then of course, like you said, it doesn't feel good in here. And that's intuition again telling us like, nope, step away, get back. And I don't have time to spend in those places, but I'll also be the first person to stand up when somebody needs to stand up for
Yeah.
what's right.
Me too.
I can't help being that person,
Right.
and it drives a wedge between me and others sometimes.
Because
but
like you
it's
say,
because
we're fighters. We wouldn't be
yes,
here
and
speaking if we weren't
yeah,
fighters.
and I'm not going to let the people that are like spreading hurt on purpose. I'm not going to let that continue. I'm not saying I would do something in a hurtful or hateful manner, but I'll put an end to it as quickly as possible, and then
Yeah. Like,
put
some
my
of these
distance
NDE
there and keep
groups,
my
I'll
distance
see
there,
them say bad things about Jesus. Well, I'm not going to stand there
which is
and let them say bad things about Jesus and just scroll on by, no more if they were sitting there talking about one of
and
my kids.
we can all point fingers at each other, but nobody has walked in my shoes. Nobody has walked in your shoes. Nobody has walked in another's shoes. And it would just be, without a doubt, we can all certainly agree, it would just be a better place if we all learn to respect one another,
Right.
and expect others' experiences without casting judgment. But
Yeah.
we don't have a society today that promotes those things. When everything is pressure and stress, and the dire need for money, it's a factual that there's just more money where there's more headaches, where there's more fighting, where there's more this and more that, all the negative stuff. People want to watch the news and they want to see what happened today. It's a fear of death. Death is illusory to me today. Death doesn't take place. What takes place is a transition. And we all get to go through this incredible humbling. And everybody will face their humbling.
Yeah.
And those that are going to have faith and prayer today and focus on evolving the soul within are going to find themselves in a much better place, because part of my near-death experience that was abundantly clear to me is either you ascend and remain to stay, or you will cycle back and do it again. Now, I was brought up a Christian, and I always wondered about, for some reason inside, my intuition always kind of was echoing in my mind, like, is there reincarnation? I feel 100% for sure that it exists now, because I know that if you didn't remain to stay, ascended, that you returned, and either you returned to your own flesh and that you've known, or are incarnated into another existence to learn more, because we're always in a state of learning in this realm. And the whole experience is absolutely fascinating. I'm glad I'm able to step back from the traumatic parts of it and look at it more
I
open-mindedly.
wanted to ask
And
you something.
absolutely.
When you were
And excuse
flying
me.
over the ambulance, and after you were out of the hospital and you went through that highway again, how did you feel?
It's so funny you bring that up, because the first time I drove down that road after the event, I thought to myself, the last time I went down this road, I was dead. And that is like, my body was dead. I was still here. As I said, our souls go on without a doubt. I'm so positive and sure of that. Forgive me, my dogs are barking. But that was just a very peculiar feeling that I will never, ever forget. And every time I go down Willowbrook Road to the hospital right down the street from my house, I think of that. I can't
I do
help but think
too.
of that.
I can
It's a
remember
very
being in the back
surreal.
seat of my parents' station wagon and remembering flying above the highway. And of course, I didn't talk about it because
So
how
you
could you talk about it, But I would remember
right.
that. And that road, it goes past the pond where I drowned. And that road is a common road. We go to Marietta. And so you have to pass that pond. You have to go down that highway. And there was this
Is that
billboard. There
Georgia?
was still a billboard there. But every time I'd see that billboard for the longest time, I get this eerie feeling. And when I get this one place, as soon as you get right past the billboard, it's just a strange feeling every time I go through there. And I didn't know what it was, but I know identify what it is now. But for the longest time, I was like, what is it about this place?
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
I totally identify with that. And you said Marietta, Georgia?
Ohio, Marietta, Ohio.
Ohio. Okay, I knew there was an Ohio also. I just asked because mom was from Georgia. So it
Okay.
is definitely an interesting feeling, though. Like, that was a great question to ask because that's the first thing I thought was like, oh my gosh, last time I was on this road, I was in an ambulance and my body was dead inside. And like, here I am alive again, driving down the same road. It just, it's a little mind boggling still on those levels. It's funny how we can be so clear about what happened and knowing what happened, but then still, like I'm upstairs today. I moved my bedroom. I had two of my friends, very dear friends, move my bedroom to down below on my first floor because I didn't want to deal with those steps anymore. And so I came up the steps today, but every time I go up and down those steps, I think about all of that, and like it brings back, and this is part of the triggers of PTSD. Like when I was
That this
having my
house
heart
is where it
attack,
happened at?
yes, at the home I'm in now, I'm still at the same home. And
Okay.
when I was having my heart attack, it was like I felt like I got shot with a nail gun, or I've never been shot with a high caliber weapon, but I felt like I got shot right smack in the middle of my chest. It was the most. There was just no question about what was happening. And so I suffer from something called Takotsubo syndrome. And there's actually a growing body of literature on this type of heart condition, but it's known as a drop dead heart attack. Um, a broken-hearted syndrome is another nickname for it, and it's got this Japanese name, Takotsubo syndrome, because that's what the shape of an octopus trap is, and the Japanese word for that is Takotsubo, and the heart resembles that in shape when we experience this syndrome. But I had an ischemic stroke along with that also, and I had a slew of other medical things. There were 7 different things that individually could have killed me that day, and indeed did. I feel like, and this is kind of strange. After I have spinal stenosis throughout my entire spine, ankylosing spondylosis. I might have said that wrong. It might be ankylosing spondylitis and spondylosis, but I have all three of those. I'll let everybody decipher that themselves. I didn't articulate that very well, but I also have slipped discs in all 3 regions of my spine, and I have broken a lumbar vertebrae in the past. But overall, with the 2 or 3 still dislocated vertebrae in my cervical area in my neck,
You were
I
pointing
am
to a
still.
line in your neck. You cut yourself when you
Yes.
fell?
No, my head went back and over, and that's why when I got up, I couldn't straighten my neck out.
Oh, you was
So
asking if I saw a line.
when I
So,
was slamming, there is a line because like I hit the wall like that and bent my neck back, and then it cracked over. So like my neck in the back, my neck was like that, and that's why I slammed it on the floor to try to straighten it up. I don't even know how I was able to get up. I got up, and then I was feeling that and could feel those bones out. And I just was thinking to myself, how am I alive and how am I even able to stand up? I already knew how vulnerable my neck was because they wanted to fuse it for about the last 15 years, maybe a little more, maybe a little less. But, the interesting thing is with all those different spinal conditions I've had for a long time, my pain is less now than it was before all this happened. And I'm quite able-bodied, which is a true miracle. I'm in pain every day, and it's pretty bad pain. But I've learned to cope with it. And again, it just seems like my pain level was reset, as crazy as that sounds. I'm sure the doctors were just astonished that I somehow came back, but I know that they also expected me to be paralyzed, so the whole experience is just it was eye-opening for everybody, needless to say. My brother said something that was kind of funny too. He says, I told him everything that happened, and he's like, well, was that better than winning the Super Bowl? And I said, well, I haven't won a Super Bowl, but oh yeah, it was kind of just funny. But what an experience. I hope this answers some folks' questions or thoughts about it themselves. And more than anything, I hope, I hope I didn't leave anything out on a personal note. It just feels like every time I want to talk about this, it's like later on, it's like, oh my gosh, I missed that part or this part.
Oh,
It's just
yeah, I know what you mean.
so much to go over. Like, I don't feel overwhelmed as much as I once did, but I just always feel like I'm missing something,
Did
But
you feel
more than
changed
anything, I just hope
afterwards?
folks will. Well, I said earlier, I've always appreciated and loved life itself, and valued the lives of others as I was raised, and I think it just underscores that heavier for me, if that makes sense. I think, if there's a strong message to carry, it's one of love and faith, and whatever works for each of us. We all need to learn to have a tolerance towards one another and respect each other's journeys, and promote love and promote faith and share love and share faith and not argue about
I
the
agree.
details of
You
those
do what
things.
works for
We
you,
all
but
know
it doesn't have to work for everybody.
exactly. Exactly. And we know in our heart of hearts what's right. And we know in our heart of hearts what's good for others. And, if something's not working for somebody else, respect also that's part of their journey. And that
Yeah.
we're having a journey. And we are very, you know, very definitely on our journeys to evolve our souls. And so each one of the steps that we take upon this journey is important. And we can't discount somebody else's whatever we think is wrong with them, or whatever we think they're doing is wrong, blah, blah, blah. It's important to let them have their experience.
Yeah. I see
We
every
didn't
day on
become
social
who we were
media, at
overnight.
least
And
one
we're like a
person saying,
flower that's always blooming.
I'm sorry, what?
I said we're like a flower that's always blooming,
Yeah.
and and each of us is like that. So we have to just let each other bloom and try to enjoy the sunshine while it's shining on us, And then what were you gonna say there? I'm sorry.
Oh, every day on social media, I'm seeing at least once a day, somebody saying how much they hate religion. It's such a common thing now. I hate religion. I hate religion. And I'm like, well, I had a bad experience with religion, so I hate all religions. I'm like, I don't go to church anymore. I wish I did. I wish I would, but I have a social anxiety, and I'm this and that, and I choose not to. But I appreciate religion because religion made me a Christian, even though we went to different churches as a kid. Our parents didn't go to church, but our grandma sent us. And then at 18, got married, and my ex, he was Catholic. So I become Catholic. And then we got divorced after 16 years. Like, well, do I go back to Catholic? Do I go back to Christian? What do I do? So I kind of went back and forth. And the Catholics did not want me back because I had been Christian. And then the Christians didn't want me because I had been Catholic. And so there is a lot wrong with religion, but I don't hate religion. I love religion. If it wasn't for religion, I wouldn't be the Christian I am today. Now, the Christian I am today may not be good enough for somebody else that goes to church or mass every single, holiday or Sunday. And then the other ones, you're too Christian. And so there's nobody fits with anybody else exactly on this scale of what is Christian and then not being Christian. But they hate religion so bad. They want to get rid of religion. Like their life would be fine if they could just get rid of religion, if they could just get rid of Christians. I don't know where this is headed, but it's headed somewhere. So,
well, I mean, we can say Revelations kind of shows us or points out where it's headed, and it's not the only great scripture or great book that is revealing in those ways. And as time goes on, those things that are written in that book and in other books are only proven more correct. But when it comes to Christianity, there's the non-Christian that can't stand Christians a lot of the time, and
and Christians can't stand each other.
Died for, and that's true. And Christ died for our sins, which means we're sinners. That means every Christian's a sinner, and when we have who am I to judge? We are sinners. We shouldn't be judging other people, but we all do. It's part of our life too. We have to make judgments every day just to survive, just to make the right movement. But judging another is a whole different thing, But again, we have to I don't want that person in my house near the kids. I don't want that person in my house near my wife, near my whatever. We all are making judgments.
Like you said, you believe in reincarnation. And I don't believe in reincarnation. But there are some Christians, as soon as they would hear you say that, they would turn it off and they'd be making comments on this channel. He's New Age. And they would discount everything else you said.
I still consider myself a Christian. And I just don't play into the name calling or the falling into this category or that category. I know what my life dictates. And I know that, Jesus was born a Jew. Jesus became the leader of Christianity and died for our sins because we're all sinners. He gave and paved a way to heaven for everybody that otherwise wouldn't be there. And that's what we're taught. That's not that's part of the doctrine. That's not part of my opinion. If it's right or wrong, sure, we could all argue about that, but it's such a poor place to focus. It's more important that we feed the homeless, that we help to stop the wars and preserve peace. And it just would be so much better a place if we would decide to focus on those things instead of letting divisive groups and individuals help us to focus on the wrong things. And we put so much energy into so much negativity. Somebody slaps somebody else at an awards event, and that's the main topic.
But 2 years ago, all the riots, they were for that.
Millions, yes. If we would have taken those millions of hours collectively wasted to feed people that are starving to death and clothe some people that are freezing, gosh, this world would be a better place. And there would be less of that type of stuff. It's like,
apparently hate is
we
really
have to
fun.
get back to common sense. It sure seems that way. And, when some people have more energy than they know.
They love to hate him for slapping him. And they love to hate each other for having a different opinion of who's right about the slap. And they hate a Republican. They hate a Democrat. They hate Biden. They hate Trump. Hate. That's all. But that's all on the news, too. The last several years. They can't just tell the news. We're going to hear all these opinions.
I watched a funny movie with Jake Gyllenhaal just 2 nights ago called Nightcrawler. I shouldn't say funny. I don't mean funny in a ha-ha comedic way whatsoever. I watched a peculiar movie with Jake Gyllenhaal, and it's called Nightcrawler, but it's about him breaking into the news world, so to speak. And so he shoots video, to make a long story short. But, the more gory the video, the higher the demand, the higher payment for it. And, I don't want to blame all the world's problems on social media, but we know social media makes everybody focus here more, but it's a tool, and tools can be used to do good and tools can be used to do bad. And we just got to each find our place within that realm and decide for ourselves, are we going to do good or are we going to do bad? And if we feel like something is promoting the bad, then we need to step out of it. But that's, those are personal choices. But time arguing is like, I can't change anybody else's mind until they're ready. You can't save a drug addict from drugs until they're ready. It's just the way it is. And we're better off, always better off spending our time with somebody who wants our time as opposed to somebody who doesn't want our time. And we should spend our time with people that value us and our time, and not spend it with those that don't value. And we don't need to judge them and all that. We already know who they are. And it's not saying they and they're bad. It's just, hey, let them have their journey, and we're going to meet down the road, and then everything's going to be okay. I want to meet those folks then when they've gone through their, hey, man, I know what you were talking about now. Wow. Or, hey, I saw you and I heard your message and it helped me. It's much better when we have a message of strength and hope. But a lot of what's happening today deflates that strength and deflates that hope in humanity. And it's a shame. We should not be arguing about all these things that we're arguing about. But who am I to stop it?
Right. We do need discussions.
Somebody needs to stand up there.
We do need discussions, and we do need to come together. But the hate can quit.
Yeah. Just got to treat each other. Yep. We just got to treat each other well and respect one another. And, a lot of it's like, it does start with the family, and it does start how children are raised. And it does start with the examples that we set for our children and for others. And I don't have any children. I only say that because I had fantastic parents,
What irritates me, I guess, the most,
those that are misguided. I haven't been an angel in my life.
Is I see it on TV and I see it in real life, where you don't like somebody, so you get everybody against that person. Like now they're going to ruin Will Smith. And no matter, say they're going to ruin Trump, or they're going to ruin this one, they're going to ruin that one. Anybody they decide that they made up their mind about, and they create a monster, and that person's not a monster. They're just different. They're outspoken, whatever. They reacted differently than most people. They're out of the norm. It's no different than the playground when somebody's wearing orange tennis shoes, or they wear glasses, or they got red hair, or they're fat, or they're too skinny. They'll pick out the one that's different, and they just pounce on them. And they say nothing joins people together as much as hate does. And it's true from the playground all the way, to the nursing home. They'll find that one that's different, and they find some kind of community in that hate. Like they have power, they belong to something. And I don't know why they can't see it. I don't know why they can't tell what they're doing and decide to become a person that's not going to be involved in attacking somebody. Jesus, that's how he was killed. They just attacked him. They hated him.
When you're not serving others and you're serving yourself, when you're not serving the creator, you're serving the other side. It's a beautiful thing today with social media. We know exactly who everybody is. And it's abundantly clear, and there's always, while you walk, there's still this opportunity to choose to change and become a better person. Most might not do it, sadly, but the door has been opened for that opportunity to change. And we all know who those are that are tearing everything down. We know what they stand for. We know that they hurt others and that they are selfish and serve themselves. And tell me that's not evil. It's abundantly clear that they are serving the wrong master, if you want to look at it with that perspective. It's a shame. The time that could be spent doing good.
Yeah.
it's wasted doing so much bad. It's just, gosh, if we took a tenth of the time that's spent with negative outcomes, if we took a tenth of that time, we could solve the world's problems. We grow enough food to feed the world several times over. Why are people starving? Greed. That's it. Simple. What's greed? Serving the self. If it's an individual or if it's a group of people, all the principled books teach the exact same thing. And the message is still the same, but humanity is still the same. And, we have these fluctuations, but humanity is still the same. But again, that's part of our journey. If I just was born and skipped over this life and ascended straight to heaven, that wouldn't have any frame of context around it. It would not make a lick of sense. How could you appreciate a perfect love if you didn't know the opposite? Every storm that I've gone through and made it through, by the way, has only made life sweeter afterwards. But that's a choice too. It can ruin life too for some people. You just got to stay focused on and determined on what your faith is and doing the right thing, And again, if my near-death experience underscores anything, it's all of the right things, that we should be celebrating together. I would love to see humanity. My dad was a retired West Point colonel. He went to Korea, he went to Vietnam, and he's not a warmonger. He's somebody that wants to preserve peace, but he's also somebody that wanted to preserve freedom. And he helped build this beautiful, great country that's getting torn down. If you look at Sun Tzu, the Art of War by Sun Tzu, it's not about warfare. It's about preserving the peace and accomplishing your goals through peaceful means. You still have to question what the goals are because there's always opposing sides. But, the principles there are very interesting also. And it's an eye-opening, very poignant book. I hope that the individuals like yourself that are helping to raise awareness of other people's NDEs, I hope, again, underscores the right things collectively as we all share. There's a reason our near-death experiences, our NDEs, have the common themes and common messages in them. And we're supposed to share those things. I don't care what anybody else thinks about me. It's important that I carry a message, and for whatever time's left, hopefully it makes a difference somewhere. And I just like to see everybody get along better.
Yeah.
I get to be a blubbering, emotional mess, but watching all this stuff hurts.
It does.
And I just wish people would stop fighting amongst themselves and learn how to respect one another and live a life of faith and share a life of love. It's a lot better place. Usually people that are full of hate grew up with hate all around them. And I understand that because I've seen it and observed it. And we have to work together to break those cycles. And it's something that's indelibly ingrained into a lot of children that are from the lower socioeconomic rung most often, and it's abundantly clear in college courses. If you take the right courses and you have good instructors that don't have their own agenda, when we underline the facts instead of try to paint a picture that doesn't exist, there's a lot to be learned that's eye-opening, and we can change those things together.
Yeah, it'd be nice if we could get over our animal instincts and get into a higher level of compassion.
And that's a big part of what it's all about right there, really. Choosing what's right. We all know what's right and what's wrong. Can we make those choices? I'm not saying it's always easy to choose right, but it sure is easier in the long game as opposed to the short game. You know, it could be easy to make a mistake in the short game because you're not thinking ahead. But when you get a little older and you're a little bit wiser, that just means you're looking down the road a little further to like, oh, I better not do that today. Or, well, last time I did that, or last time so-and-so did that. Hopefully we all start learning from one another's mistakes so we don't have to make the mistakes ourselves. You know, some of us are hard-headed and we have to make mistakes ourselves and think, oh, I'm different. That's not going to happen to me. Boom, it happens. You know, you just got to learn to listen to each other and stop being so selfish. You know, lots to learn. And the near-death experience is absolutely just a very fascinating phenomena that again underscores so much of the right things. You know, I just am thankful that I know without a doubt what I always knew in my heart of hearts is the truth that, you know, our energy, it may not stay in this body forever, but it exists and it persists after this experience. And, you know, I'm human. I forget sometimes that I'm going to be reunited with those loved ones I've lost. When I can step back and get out of my own way and think about it for a minute, you know.
Oh, I meant to ask you.
Yes.
Now you saw someone in your NDE that wasn't dead. Is that right?
Yeah. Yes.
How do you explain that? Because I've heard that several times lately, in fact.
Well, I just feel like we were both at a place in our lives where we were coming from the right place in our hearts. And, you know, none of us are ever really dead. We were just in that place together in my experience. And I believe we were there. And it seems kind of silly, but after my near-death experience, we spent 18 months intimate together. We're an item. And we used to talk about, oh, I dreamed about this last night and I had the same dream, ha ha ha, and I was there. And you know, we would be at the same places in our dreams. And I mean, some of those things kind of sound silly almost, but you know, we were there together. But like I said, I wasn't dead anyway. She didn't have a near-death experience. She did end up breaking her neck 18 months after I did. And she's also a complete miracle. It doesn't appear that she had the near-death experience or died in the process of her automobile accident, but you know, she was left in a very poor state physically, and they didn't know if she was going to walk again at all to start with. Thought she might be a paraplegic, and today, if you were to see her or me, you would think we were both fully, perfectly functional, and indeed somehow we both are.
See, the other ones that I heard that experienced a live person on the other side, they soon afterwards died themselves. But now she had a near-death experience soon after. But
Yeah,
you said
yeah,
something, I don't
exactly.
think I heard you correctly, because you was talking and you said, but I wasn't dead. I thought you said that. I don't think that's what you said.
Well, what I meant was I may have been dead from the physical realm, but again, back to what I had said a long time ago was about death being illusory, that the energy that we are persists. I was dead in this realm.
Okay.
And
I just want to clarify.
I didn't mean to construe that. So what you heard was correct, but I didn't articulate it very well. But, you know, I was certainly dead in this realm going through my near-death experience, but my overall death, I was just in the other realm. So I don't know. I almost don't even, you know, it's like funerals. I told my brother when we experienced some deaths, I said, hey, Donnie, my brother, who are funerals for? And he looked at me a little bit and he goes, the survivors. And I'm like, absolutely. You know, and it sounds kind of silly. A lot of people don't think about that, but we're all, you know, when you're here in this realm and you don't understand death fully and you don't have full faith that you're going to persist afterwards, then of course we're left with this great mourning in our heart. And even when you understand that we're going to ascend and that we're going to all be together again one day, we still have a great emptiness and feeling of loss. That's just normal as part of our experience. But when we can step out of ourselves and then realize like we will be together again in that eternity, this part of our experience is the blink of an eye, you know, and it won't be long again. If it's 50 years or if it's tomorrow, it won't be long again. I'll be back there and I'll be at peace and I'll be happy, indeed happier than I've ever known. I'll be embraced with love like I've always prayed for here, that I've never seen. You know, I'll know all those things that I would like to have happen here on earth that I have never seen yet. You know, I still believe in my idea.
Because I don't want my kids going look at the
used to
ground and
be,
thinking I'm down there, because I'm not going to be there.
I used to be against that. And now I'm very open-minded to that because I'm not going to be in that body. You know, I am a donor. I want to be a donor still. If there's anything that can help somebody else, I think that's important. But again, that's a, you know, individual decision. And but it's neat. We all can change, and I pray that we all do change for the betterment of not ourselves, but for society and for mankind. And you know, each and every day we wake up, we all have that opportunity to just be a little bit better today than we were yesterday.
Right.
Not instantly, not trying to be perfect, you know, but you know, as each day progresses, if we take these lessons to heart and learn well, we can do a little bit more good each day for others, not for ourselves. And when we are serving other people, our own lives will be just fine. It's too bad we live in these cycles that emphasize panic and doom and things of that nature, because it only makes people react in a way that makes them serve themselves more than others. But that's really a part of the tearing down. It's a lot of psychological warfare going on in those respects. You know, sadly, when it comes to opposition, what's opposition want to do to the other party? They always want to control it. It's always the same old story, you know, and people, you know, that's not what's happening. And then, sure, it's what's happening. It's what's gone on for thousands of years, for eons. It's what always happens. You know, it's still happening, but it doesn't have to be that way. If each person takes care of themselves to the best of their ability and is giving to others, that is more contagious than anything. And that will always rule. The truth will always find its way through. Right will always eventually overcome bad. And there's proof of that time and time again. And, you know, on the short term, that might not always be the truth, but in the long game, again, it's always true.
Right.
You know, I have great faith there, but faith and love are so critical to all of this, you know, just being good to one another, for crying out loud. It's a shame that we all can't just be better to each other. But I have faith that, you know, today's a new day and the sun is shining bright and it's shining on me right now. And it's going to be a day where we can all just be a little better today.
Yeah. There are so many people predicting that yesterday, Saturday, was going to be the end of the world. Well, see you Sunday.
You know, it's yeah, exactly. And you know, what's the end of the world even mean? I mean, you know, I don't want to say that stuff doesn't matter to me. It does, but then again, no, it doesn't, because there's going to come a time where I'm not going to be here anyway, and I'll be happy I'm in that other realm, and so will we all when we're there, you know. But I don't know. I don't feel full of panic and anxiety and everything like I used to, and I'm thankful for not the trauma, but the experience. You know, a lot of people ask in our Facebook groups about, does death hurt? Yeah, it hurts. The physical aspect of it, for me,
you think
really
a heart
bad.
attack hurts, or falling downstairs hurts, drowning hurts?
It was absolutely horrific. And we're very fortunate the body has mechanisms that keep most of this memory from us a lot of the time. But for me, the memories are sharp as a tack. And I'll tell you, April, I had a few folks that wanted to do some interviews with me, and life has been tumultuous, to say the least. And it's more like, not that I didn't have the time to do them so much, but I didn't have the inner calm where I felt like I could articulate myself well. And if my gut, my intuition says just wait, then I just hope others will be patient and let me do the interviews with them when it's the right time. I had a car crash with my significant other on April the 1st. And we had these younger folks pull out of a parking lot, really about 35 or 40 miles per hour, just directly in front of us. So there's nobody on the highway in front of us. And then all of a sudden there's a car in front of us. And I've never hit anything so hard in my life. And, you know, I had my pacemaker defibrillator, so I was hurting a little bit under that. I slammed my knee into the dashboard terribly bad. And long story short, it's like, I better do some of these interviews, because it's one of those moments where it's like, gosh, I could have been gone again. But, you know, somehow, you know, I had a lot of abrasions. No, I didn't have a lot of abrasions. My lady had a lot of abrasions. Really bad. Our faces looked like people didn't even know I was driving the car. They couldn't believe I was driving the car. You know, my knee hurt. My knee still hurts, but it's like 25-year-old car. And somehow I walked out of there like, you know, it's airbags deployed and whatnot, but the whole front of my car was just crushed back probably a couple feet. And it's like, I just sometimes wonder, like, how on earth did I walk away from that? And, you know, I went to the ambulance. I mean, I took an ambulance to the hospital, but when you look at a car after going through something like that, it's hard to believe we can walk away sometimes. Like, you know, my lady's face got quite banged up. We looked very different from one another. When you realize we were sitting right next to each other in the same car, it almost doesn't make sense, you know? Thank God neither one of us had any breakages. The other party that was at fault, thank God they seem to be doing okay from what their insurance agent said. But it's, again, the point being, it's one of those moments where you just realize, just like that, could have been over, you know, this part of the experience. And I'm thankful, again, it's not. But it was important for me to, hey, I was sitting there thinking about things like, okay, now that I'm calming down again, what are those things I need to take care of that I promised? And getting in touch with you and doing this was something I talked about with you a long time ago. And thank you for your grace and your patience.
You were on 5 months ago, so anybody wants to go back and watch that one too. It's very different
Yeah,
than today.
I think it's important that,
So I'm glad you
it just
come
felt
on.
good. And me as well. And I really appreciate everything, Peggy. And happy Easter again. That's,
You
you know,
too.
I said happy Easter to a couple of folks last night when I was out, strangers, when I was out in public. And I even questioned, like, should I say that? But everybody said happy Easter back. But it's like, you know, should I even say that to people? It's like the Merry Christmas or Happy Holidays. You know, I don't
All
want to be
right.
purposely offensive. And it's not so important to say what I feel like has to be said, but happy Easter and
Happy
happy
Easter.
holiday and all. And I really
All right.
appreciate everything very much.
All right. Enjoy the rest of your day.
And you too. And God bless you. Thank